Hello everyone, let's talk about useRef in React. UseRef is very similar to useState, but as we know, the useState holds a value or an array or an object and re-renders that component whenever the state of that value changes, which isn't always what we want. The useRef, meaning use reference, does not cause re-render of your component each time the value it holds changes. In order for us to use the useRef hook, we have to import it from React. And also, let me import use state and use effect just to demonstrate what I said about causing re-renders. Now on my page, I will have a button here. After that, I'm going to have a button on my page with the text, click me. Let's add some styling to our button. I'll set the on click handler of the button to a function named handle click. Now I just have to declare the function. Before I put anything inside this handle click function, let me first initialize our use state with a variable named number. We'll give it a value of 0. And then in our handle click, we want to set the number to any previous value the number was plus 2. Now to demonstrate that anytime I click this button, my component re-renders, I will use the use effect hook for that. With use effect, if we don't pass in any dependency array, we'll perform some code anytime this component re-renders. In our case, let's console.log re-rendered. Now let's go to our console. Now in my console here, anytime I click this button, I see the text rendered to tell you that the component is being re-rendered. Now that's where useRef comes in. So instead of using the use state, let's take it out and use useRef. We'll set the initial value to 0. And then in our function here, our console.log, our ref, the useRef returns an object with one value, .current. So if I set .current, now if I set the current to increase by 1 each time I call the function handle click, now if I save, you see I have on my console here re-rendered. And so if I click on the button now, you see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But our re-rendered does not appear again because the component is not re-rendering but just increasing the current value of our ref. UseRef can also refer to an HTML element in the DOM, and that's where useRef becomes very useful. Let us create below this button here an input. I'll give it some class name to make it visible on the screen. We now have our input here on the screen. On my input here, let's save the ref attributes to ref. I'm going to name this a very meaningful name. Let's call this input ref. And I'll set it to null as its initial value. Let's take this off. Change this back to input ref. The ref attribute of any HTML element is a special attribute used to create reference to that element. So in my function handle click here, I can call my input ref dot current, knowing that my input has a method on it called focus. I can call my focus. So each time I click on this button, it should put my input in focus. Let's create another class name when it's in focus. So when it's in focus, we should have our border to be amber 500. And also when it's in focus, we should have our outline to be none. Let's remove the height here so it doesn't disturb. And then let's have a padding of 3 or 2. Let's save. The- Now when I click on the button, my input turns amber because it's in focus without this component re-rendering. And to prove that, let's go to our console and let's refresh this page. So the component mounts for the first time where we have our use effect showing re-rendered. When I click on this button, you see we don't see anything like re-rendered. To clearly show you that this component is not re-rendering, I have an error showing on my IDE here. Input.ref.current is possibly null. If you're not using TypeScript, you don't have to worry about that. But if you are, then on where you initialize your useRef, you have to create a type for that to be HTML input element or null. And then on your function, you chain it with optional chaining that if it exists, then check for the focus method on it. So if I click, everything works fine now and the error is gone. Let me demonstrate another way of using this input ref. So you can also copy this input ref in the handle click function. Let's paste it there. And instead of the focus method, let's do dot value and then let's equal to a string of home. And yes, TypeScript is saying the left hand side of an assignment expression may not be optional. To remove that, instead of using optional chaining here, give it the exclamation mark to tell TypeScript that this would always be available. But if you're using normal JavaScript, it doesn't, you won't have to do all of that. And so let's save. If I click on the button now, I have my input value to be home. Whenever you want your component to store a value and change that value without causing a re-render, then useRef is what you should go for. While useState is used when you want your component to always re-render. So that's it guys for useRef. See you next time. Bye.